allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome. We have a fairly meaty agenda this evening, and because of that, we've moved it around a little bit and put the consent agenda at the end because of the issues that we have before us. We are anticipating some lengthy discussion, and with that, we will begin with public comment. We do have time allotted on the agenda for anyone who wishes to speak on an item that does not appear on the agenda or that is part of the agenda and is not part of a public hearing. If you do wish to speak, please come to the podium, state your name and address, and then your comments. That being the case, we will move on to new business. New business item number 1, human resource review for our organization. Cheryl.
Good afternoon, Mayor, members of council. The HR review includes an overview of the various departments in the organization. It includes an assessment of the staffing levels as well as the cost for those various staffing levels. The proposal as part of this review is that we would realign some of our resources to achieve some cost savings as well as some organizational efficiencies. Mary is going to go through a presentation that gives you an assessment of how we look compared to some peer organizations, both urban and rural, our staffing levels, and some of our growth that we've seen in the past, as well as what we anticipate in terms of growth projections. As part of that, the assessment, I have asked each department director to provide an overview of the tasks they completed within the past year and those items that they think their department, they would envision their department doing in the upcoming budget year, and the resources needed to complete those tasks. In addition to this organizational assessment, we will be, hopefully at the beginning of the year, getting with you to do some visioning so that we can kind of see where you'd like to go with the organization, and we started that process a little bit with your business community. So I'd like for Mary to kind of go through that presentation. After she completes that, I'm going to cover a couple of things, and then we'll tell you kind of what we're looking for from you tonight as a governing body.
Cheryl.
Good evening. Thank you very much for the opportunity to do our presentation over human resources. As Cheryl said, we're just going to do kind of an overview. I tried to make it brief because I know we have a very long night, but it's very important that you have the data that we're going to present to you, and that we can also then use this data to be able to move forward. The mission of human resources is to assist the city of Gardner by providing quality human resource services responsive to the changing needs of our employees and our management. The purpose of the review is to ensure that the governing body has the appropriate data to make decisions to prepare for our future. We also want to provide data regarding our staffing levels and salaries. Our population growth is important to look at where we've been, where we are, and where we're going. The city of Gardner has experienced tremendous population growth. Since 1980, the city has doubled in size every 10 years. As you can see, in 1980, we were like 2,300 people. 1990, 42, 2000, 93, 2010, 19,123. This is all census data also. So if you take that assumption that 2020 gosh, we would be at just shy of 40,000 people. Our HR employee staffing levels, we went back and looked so you would see where we were in 2005 to 2012. We were trending upward in adding staff to provide these services and to make sure that we are compliant with all of our rules and regulations and training. As you see, we peaked in 2009 and considerably then went down after that. While the city remains strong at just shy of 20,000 citizens, our employee count is down to the 2005 level of 101 employees. That 101 does not include the Gardner Electric employees. This is a view for you to just look at staffing to population to staffing levels. You can see in 2000, we were fairly close, and I didn't put in all of the years from 2000 to 2010, but you can see where our population has gone, where we peaked in our employee base. Our population continues to increase while our employee FTE count decreases. You also asked me to compare, when we talked before, to look at not only metro but rural areas, and I'm going to provide that data to you as well, cities of similar size. We'll look first at our comparable metro cities: Belton, Gladstone, Grandview, Prairie Village, Raytown, Warrensburg, Ottawa, and Gardner. The highest population city is the one at 29,000. They have 154 employees. These are some of the rural cities that I think several of you brought to my attention for us to look at. In our rural cities, it's interesting, their employee counts are actually higher. Garden City's population of 26,000 people has an employee count of 305. Hutchinson, 301, they're at 42,000. McPherson at 100. That does not include their EUB. Their EUB is electric, water, wastewater, and it's about 70 employees. Our 101 count does include our water and wastewater, as well as some administrative people as well. Derby is at 22,000, 175 employees, and Emporia is just an hour and 15 minutes down the road at about 25,000 people, 243. So you can see, regardless of whether we're looking at the metro or the rural areas, that we have some disparity in our looking at population to employee count. This is just a graph to give you a different view of what we just talked about. I also looked at employee count per 1,000 citizens. Different ways, we can look at data a lot of different ways. I'm just trying to give you a look. One of the things that I wanted to point out, I thought quite interesting, was if you look at Ottawa, Ottawa sits at about a little over 12, I think they were 12.4 employees per 1,000 citizens. Ottawa is just a little over 13,000 population. Gardner sits down at 4.7. So quite a bit of difference when you look at their, 20 minutes down the road from us at 13,000. They also do have an electric utility. So that's where we are today. And you kind of think, okay, here we are, now what do? We need to start looking for our future. We can't change where we are today, but we do need to look at where we're going. And again, we've experienced tremendous growth. Based on the trending over the last 4 decades, the city would be near 40,000 residents by 2020. I also want to let you know that 40,000, we looked at our last official comprehensive plan of, actually was our Parks Master Plan, and we went through and looked at the projections of population off that plan, and that's where this number came from. Actually, that consultant and plan actually said about 45,000 people. We took it down just a little bit. Those were all verified and certified by the Secretary of State in July of 07, 08. So these are valid numbers for us to think about. Give or take, even if you said give or take 5,000, 5,000 residents, so we'll be at 35,000. So something to think about. So what Cheryl asked me to do when we talked about this was to go back and say, okay, let's look at cities of that size, and where would we need to be? What would we need to be planning for? So we looked at Leavenworth, Leawood, and Lenexa, kind of a more rural city. Also a couple in in our metro, and also a couple cities that tend to always kind of come up that we hear, gosh, what do we want to be like? What do they do? What are their policies? How do they look? So we kind of picked those two cities. I know you can't say, okay, we're a city of 20,000 and they're 40. I just want you to see what work we have ahead of us if we're going to prepare to be a city of that population. And, as I said, you review this data both from the metro and rural comparisons, and we see a significant difference in the number of employees from cities of comparable populations. And then when you look at those that are rising, where we need to be, it's very clear that we have a lot of work to do, and we need to put some planning in place to get us there. We'll move on to the marked salary study. The purpose of this study is to determine if there are any significant deviations from the market. And I'm going to back up just a little bit because I went back and I looked. I wanted to give you this information. In the year 2000, the city did their last comprehensive review of their compensation system. They had an outside consultant come in and do a complete review of that. So it's been 12 years. So since 2002 then, the city started using the marked salary study. That's what we've been using for 10 years now. So it may be a point in time that we want to talk about, do we want to have a comprehensive look at our salaries and where we should be, how we should be doing it. I went through and read this book that they did in 2000. It was a great process. That's how we came up with our compensation system. The evaluation system, it all came out of that plan. So just things for you to think about as we're talking about where we should go, what we need to do, envisioning both for the city and then also our employee base. So as I told you, we've used the study for 10 years. Cities independently complete the requested information and send that to MARC. The finance division of MARC compiles the data for study and then supplies the information back to the participating cities. So it is an independent study. It's just done a little differently. It may not be as in-depth of they didn't sit down and talk to council and what do you want to do, didn't talk to department heads, but it is an in-depth study. It cost us $100 to do it. So, as we talk about a comprehensive study, also want you to understand what this one does cost. Sometimes, a lot of time on our part, but that is the actual dollar cost. So this plan and this study looks at local government wages for comparable jobs. What are the minimums, the maximums, the average, and number of employees in the position. They do a population chart as well. That's where I got those population numbers for you for the cities. So it's, it's a fairly in-depth, adequate study for us to look at. We have 44 positions that we could actually do in the study because not all of our positions are actually in that MARC study. Electric's one of them. There's some of our water or wastewater positions that aren't all in there. So it's not every single one, but 44 of our positions we were able to study. And out of those, 24 positions were below the average. We're not looking about, are we at the top? We're just saying, are we average? And 5 were 20% or more below. We do have 11 positions that sit at the average, and I'd say that's just like a deviation 2% one way or the other. I kind of call it average. So that's 11 positions. And then 9 we have that are slightly above average. 4 are 10% above the average, and 1 is 20% above the average. I will tell you that as I look at these positions that are average or slightly above, quite a majority of those are due just to the longevity of the employee in those positions. So if somebody new was coming in that position, if we had turnover, we would see a different result on that. So I just took 2009 to 2012, and let's look at these years. 16 of our 33 positions were 10% or more below. In 2010, 16 of 36, and in 2011, 19 of 44, or 10% or more below the area market average. So there's a few other things that have happened during this time frame as well, and I know some of you are newer on the council, so I thought I want to make sure everybody has the same information, and if it's old news to you, I apologize. Staffing levels were frozen back in 2009 and no new positions were added. We decreased our ICMA retirement offering and that's the match that the city gave from 4% to 1%. Our uniform allowance, which was basically, it's not our entire uniform, but our jeans and some of the things that we allowed for our maintenance workers were discontinued, and employee portion of health costs have increased. We also have, got more good news I can share with you. Our turnover for the last 5 years, I cannot provide you data prior to that because it didn't exist. We started keeping that data, I did when I came in. We had 68% turnover of all of our positions. So if you looked at all of our positions with the city of Gardner, turned over 68% of those turned over. 40% of those turned over twice. So in 5 years, we've had 2 people in those. 27% of them turned over 3 times. We also have a number that have turned over 4 and 5 times in one position. In our management positions, and I wanted to point this out to you because we also know that a strong organization has strong management and strong leadership. We have 41% turnover in our management positions. That's if you include our police department. We've had no turnover in our police department until this year with the passing of Chief Francis. But if we pull police out and you look at the other departments of the city, we've had a 78% turnover of our management staff. We do exit interviews with employees, and 52% of those people told me they left for better compensation. These percentages do not include the employees that moved to Johnson County Fire District or our reduction in force that took place in 2009. So these are just the people who were here and left, whether they relocated or left for better compensation.
Mary, can I ask one quick question?
Sure,
I'm sorry,
absolutely.
hopefully it's going, but on the 52% stating that they left for better compensation, how many of those left for better or similar positions that paid better? Or did they leave for a different sort of job that paid higher?
No, most of them left for very similar positions that just paid better.
Okay, thank you.
In government work or in
Yes.
private sector?
Yes, most of them left for government work. There were a few that left for private, but most of our employees that have left have gone on and stayed in government work.
Okay.
And that was in bad times, Mayor?
I'm sorry?
That
Yes.
was in bad times?
Yes.
Okay. So in good times, our numbers might be a little inflated?
Well, I mean, 2007 wasn't terribly bad,
Right, pretty bad.
you know, I mean.
It was getting started.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mary,
I'm
what
sorry.
would you consider, what are we considering management positions?
Supervisor, manager, director. So we haven't had any turnover, we only had 1 turnover in our director, so our supervisors and our managers.
So,
Yes. And you know, we have professional positions, but if they're not considered a management position, they're not in that. Okay. So I just want to give you a little information about some of your departments as well. And in Parks and Recreation, you know, we're a Tree City. We get the Tree City Award multiple times. And since during this period of time that we're talking about, here's all the facilities that we've added for the staff to work on. As you know, our Celebration Park, which is a beautiful, big park for us to offer our citizens, but also maintain those nice grounds and the buildings to take care of that, to make sure that we can continue to provide those great services out there. The Gardner Aquatic Center, all of you I think have visited it, so I don't have to say a lot about that. And then 3 trails, Moonlight Road, South Center, and North Central. Those are greenways and trails, so there's 3 of those, and then Gardner Junction Park. We'll move to Public Works. Water and wastewater, you know, we're very proud of having the best tasting water in Kansas award. So through all of this, I want to make sure you know there's a lot of good services that we still provide. Our wastewater has had Plan of the Year 6 years in the last 10. We've had Plan of the Year awards out there, so that says a lot about those employees that are working in these plants. We'll look at our system operations, and I just want you to see these are the things that we're maintaining. The employee base that we have is maintaining this work. Sanitary sewers, our cumulative miles. In 2001, we had 61 miles, and in 2012, we have 127 miles. Our water lines were at 69 miles in 2001. In 2012, 105 miles. We also then look at water production. In 2001, we had 491 million gallons of water that we produced and went through our plant. In 2012, 855 million gallons. We had 3 sanitary lift stations in 2001. We now have 20. In our finance department, we have received the comprehensive annual financial award yearly from 2004 to 2012, and that is a huge project, and it is a really great honor that our staff has received that. Utility billing, that kind of tells you a lot about our citizens and what's going on, but annually we've generated 85,000 bills in 2007, and in 2012 we're at 173,000 with a projection of 176 in 2013. Our annexation information, this is on development. We, in 2005, had 6,000 acres annexed for the city of Gardner. In 2012, we have 6,511 acres. This does not include the intermodal project. Some things that happened during this time as well. We launched our in-house leadership program. We did receive the KACM, which is the Kansas County City Manager Association Innovative Award. That was for that program. Our citizen satisfaction surveys, continued, our percentages continue to go up. In this last survey, we actually got very good remarks from our citizens. I know I've talked about this a lot, but we have decreased workers' compensation premium cost over $200,000. Our overtime has been reduced $196,000. So to kind of wrap this up, there's a lot of data. I know I've shared a lot of things with you, but we must look for creative, innovative ways to continue to maximize efficiencies while continuing to deliver quality services to our citizens. I hope by utilizing the data provided, the governing body has a comprehensive view of historical and current staffing and salary levels. And then the data is to help and guide you, to assist you in our visioning process to develop a ready workforce, and then so that we will be ready to implement your visioning plan. I'd also like to just take a minute, if I could, and tell you our department directors and several of our managers did a phenomenal job of providing the data for me that I presented to you in their department. So I just wanted to make sure that you knew they had a great part in this, and I really do appreciate their help.
I have 2 questions.
Okay.
And I know you may not have this now, and I understand at a high level it's good to look at population to FTE. However, I think it would be beneficial for some key elements such as parks, water, sewer, and roads to understand a comparison of these cities of the square mileage that's covered, because if I'm a Hutchinson or a more rural city, I may have more coverage from an infrastructure perspective than I do in Gardner. So do we have comparisons? So Jumper Parks, can we say for some of these cities they have 100 square miles of parks and we have 200? Can we get to that information?
We can. We can get the square miles for various cities that we have that are listed. And that is a good indicator of how looking at, the staffing. The fundamental concept also is that the budget preparation or the park service plan or the monitoring of those facilities is going to be very similar here, even with a smaller square mile area. It's just a matter of your cost, your transportation cost to get out to service those areas. Well, we absolutely can get that.
Okay. Then the other question that I have, and I don't know if anybody would know this, but so we talked about water and wastewater and the mileage or the increase from I think 2001. I'm assuming that as we increase, technology has also improved as well, which should give us. So I guess what I'm trying to get at is that's not necessarily a 1-for-1. I mean, can we quantify some of that to say, the stuff that we've put in place recently has equated to us not needing 2 people that we would have needed in 2001?
Yes and no, because in some cases, We haven't necessarily, we bought some equipment and some, include some technology, but there are still some technology needs that we have. And as I visited various departments, and I'm glad you brought up kind of water, wastewater, because, you know, in visiting wastewater, I'm finding that they still need some technology to be able to do, you know, their jobs more effectively and efficiently. So yes and no, while it's improved, we haven't necessarily kept current with making sure that we have all the technology that's needed in those areas. And we are looking at that as well.
Okay.
I kind of got a follow-up question to that. It seems like we've doubled the mileage for our water and wastewater lines, but that's been done since 2001. I believe that the lifetime on lines like that should be somewhere between 30 and 50 years. So this is newer pipe that went in that probably isn't as likely to be breaking right now. Water main breaks or wastewater breaks. I'm not saying that it needs any less ongoing upkeep, but for such new pipes, I mean, they're probably not causing us the same kind of problem that the pipes that were in the ground before 2001.
And actually, I can answer a little bit of that. The drought conditions this year, we actually so far have had 58 water line breaks, which is kind of a record. So, you know, there's the population, there's the mileage, but then there's just...
Mother Nature.
Yes, Mother Nature. There you go.
A couple other, you know, I know we talked about the miles, and that all changes. Our road miles increased as well. So, you know, Public Works Streets has maintenance responsibility for a greater number of road miles, and then of course police have patrol responsibility for those miles as well. So that's increased. And then sewer, I think, you know, and I agree with Chris on the age of the sewer lines. Sewer lines are typically not those things that break, thankfully. The ones that do break are typically water lines. But when you look at the change in the number of lift stations that we have, and lift stations are a source of very high maintenance and call-outs, and they are a very critical piece of our infrastructure simply because of our topography. And so that is a piece from the stream perspective on maintenance that we wouldn't necessarily see on lines, but you know, we still have that greater bit of maintenance. And then in our comparison cities, I know that, you know, we're looking at the gross numbers, but you know, in those cities, for example, you gave the McPherson comparison, and then when you add in the utility staff, it changes the dynamic. Similarly with our other cities, Lenexa, for example, I believe is on Water District 1, so they don't have water. I don't know if they have their own sewer or if they're on Johnson County. They're on Johnson County, so you know that staff's
Actually,
so I think
Lenexa does not have water, wastewater, or electric. So,
right.
Like us, they have the general fund, police, and fire.
Right, they do have fire. And then Leawood, similarly, I don't believe has a water. Okay. And I think that it's kind of a blend. Olathe is a hybrid. You know, some Johnson County, some their own, and so on. So it is challenging to make those comparisons. But I think the data really did demonstrate that we are and have been even at our peak running below our peers from the standpoint of number of staff allocated to serving the community. And that actually, quite frankly, is a very good testament to the staff here in Garden, Kansas, and I'm glad to hear that.
You know, one of the things that actually came to mind as well when I looked at this, it wasn't just one city that was significantly higher, it was virtually all of them. And so I think we really have to stop. I'm not saying which is right or wrong. I'm just saying, as we go into our visioning and we start looking to the future, I think these are things that we have to really stop and take a look at and say, what is that works for Garden? With having, basically a full-service city, less fire right now. But what is that? And maybe none of these numbers may be right, but again, when you see all of the cities where there's such a huge deviation from what we have, I think we have to do our due diligence and look and see what is it that where should we be? What is that number?
So one of the questions I have, because I think this is key, especially in parks and public works, is I am assuming, based on everything that we've seen, that we're going to spend all of our maintenance budget in those areas this year, correct? So it's not just a matter of FTEs, because if we're not funding things in the budget for these FTEs to do, then, it's really both. They go hand in hand. We don't want to hire people just to bring up our numbers if we're not going to fund things for them to do. So, I just think there's many indicators that we need to consider as we go through this, other than just increasing.
And I'm glad you brought that up. That's a very good point, because as we start to move into visioning and we start to look at, okay, now we have a plan, and how do we fund that plan? We start to think about kind of the capital improvement component and the maintenance that we put it in place. It is important that we look at it. We're all the way in. It's not just staffing, but it is also implementation and execution through the budget. So excellent point to make sure that we keep at the forefront as we look at the vision. So kind of where do we go from here?
So, yeah, next step.
We believe we're not going to ask you tonight to allow us to add another 100 or even 20 employees. But what I would like us council to consider is to, after having had an opportunity to sit down with every director on their staff and talk about their respective units, I would ask you to allow us to realign the resources in the organization so that we can build a framework to be able to move forward to implement whatever vision the council presents to us. So to that end, I'd like to, you received a salary ordinance earlier. I'd like to give you an amended salary ordinance that looked at realigning some of the resources we have. And I'll answer any questions you may have after that opportunity.
And just for the record, there was previously an executive session scheduled for new business item number 2. The executive session has been removed, and we are moving to new business item number 3, ordinance providing the range of salaries and compensation of various officers. And as Cheryl indicated, the ordinance not only talks about the range of salaries, but it also talks about positions and how they are allocated.
Mary, I have a quick question for you. I know we're kind of reviewing what Cheryl was presenting to us. I'm just using McPherson or Derby as an example, based on your study, but did we contact McPherson or Derby as an example, and I'm very familiar with McPherson, and just ask them what their projected FTE hiring count would be in 2013 to 2015, the next 2 or 3 years, based on their personal growth? Did we have a chance to do that?
No, I did not.
Okay.
I can, but I have not.
No, it's just a quick question, because I'm just seeing that they're, 7.5 FTE per 1,000, from a community perspective. And as that community grows, which I know it is, I just wondered what their break point was. Is it 2,500 people or 3,000 people?
That's a great question, and we can definitely follow up, and that would be great information for you all to even have during your vision process.
Mary, what work is not being done with the level of employee staffing that we have that needs to be done? So approaching it from a different perspective, not how we compare statistically, but what do we need?
That is a great question. I don't know that I can answer that for each of the departments. Cheryl, do you have
I
an
think,
assessment?
I think that's probably a good vision discussion of, okay, what would we do if we had additional staff? I will tell you that, from a high-level assessment, we are, in some departments, we're putting out fires. It's very difficult to move to best management practices when we don't have staff. In some departments, we are delaying being able to finalize products to give back to the customers because we don't have the resources to be able to turn around. There are some things that really citizens should be able to walk in and get, but because we don't have the resources, they're not able to get those things in the immediate time frame. But, I mean, that is something clearly each department director, because they're the resident experts for their department, could provide when we sit down in probably a workshop session.
I mean, I would assume that if, you know, the directors would say, I absolutely cannot do this job if it were necessary to bring on more people. And let's face it, a lot of the time, we don't have the money, you know, for the supplies and the materials, at least in public works, even if we did have people, right? So,
But yeah, exactly, back to
Yeah,
what
it goes
Christie
back
It
talked
to-
goes back to
about.
what, right.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I think part of the thing, and I'll use an example of complaints that I've heard recently is the time it takes to get building permits. And so there's two ways to look at that. It's either you hire more people to get them out quicker, or you look at that organization and you say, we want you to reprioritize, and this is now your number one priority, and all this stuff goes on the back burner. So, I mean, I think there's different ways that we can probably handle multiple scenarios, but I think we've probably all heard different, maybe residential complaints from, well, not even just residents, but business owners about maybe things that are taking longer, or maybe services that they're not getting, that we should maybe talk through. And like I said, it doesn't necessarily mean you hire people, it just means maybe you say, all right, these 10 things that you were doing, this is your number one priority.
And that's, I think, a good, as Cheryl indicated, envisioning discussion, because envisioning, we want to bring the business community in, we want to bring the residents in to find out what's going on, because it does. You know, the service level is either established by goal, or service levels established by ability. And, you know, I think here we see a little bit of both. And my assessment of what goes on is that we have this sort of moving service level. When one gets to the point where it's seeing the attention, it's getting the comments, then we work on it and it comes up, and something else drops down until it gets to the point where it's getting the attention, and then we shift it back up and we shift it up again. And I think, you know, what I see here is an attempt to do just that, is to shift things so that perhaps we're spending, we're allocating resources toward existing resources toward different activities, rather than tacking on. I didn't do a count here, but I don't think there's not a net add in this, is there?
There's a small, net add,
104, okay. So there's
103,
three
well within the,
proposed.
proposed budget amount, with a little bit left for us to discuss with you at visioning what you'd like to do with it.
So basically, this is, I was trying to go through and do a comparison, that you're realigning positions.
Yes.
And basically, I think what you're saying in summary is you're adding one, however, you're changing the range for several,
Yes.
which from an overall money perspective is,
A net savings, that is exactly what I'm saying.
so could you go through the line by line with what things you're adding?
Sure. Do you want to come up and?
In range 2, our maintenance workers, that number of employees was going to 18. no other changes in that range.
That's what Mary, you said it's going to 18, and that's from what, the prior?
But the previous one,
Previous,
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Right, when we have those reductions as we go through each, and then obviously the additions of some new positions, are we gonna try to identify folks within the organization that fit some of these different roles, or will it be individuals who will just, you know, change those around, or how will we make those adjustments internally with people?
Both.
Yeah,
All of
okay.
the above.
All of the
Okay.
above.
Just wondering, okay.
In range 3, a food inspector and a recreation specialist. No other changes in that particular range.
So those are ads?
they're moving.
There are ads or changes. Some positions are changing.
So the job titles?
Job titles are changing. In range 4, a planning technician, 1 engineering technician, a risk coordinator, executive assistant, senior human resource specialist, accountant. No additional changes in that range. In range 5, engineer 1, 2 building inspectors, a management analyst, a recreation superintendent, and a park superintendent. I should also point out that the recreation supervisors are 2, and you will see no park supervisor. In range 6, a customer service manager and a senior accountant. In range 7, a planning manager, fiscal services manager, and administrative services manager. All director positions remain the same.
So have you figured out from a dollar perspective what that means? Do you have a ballpark?
I do the ballpark. Oh, you mean of what kind of, what they call
Yeah.
savings? Yeah, I think we could probably realize, about 20,000 in savings.
That's sustainable, year over year.
Oh, yes.
That's not like not buying a snowplow.
Oh, no, absolutely not, because we're gonna bring back kind of the piece of making sure staff has food to.
I guess it's worthwhile to point out too, this wasn't done in a vacuum. This was done with the work of the directors and the organization rather than just a unilateral discussion.
Absolutely, this represents the leadership of this organization's recommendations on how we might set a framework for the organization. Every department director, we met with them, I've met with them solo, met with them with Mary's met with them, we've had a series of meetings, and we actually started getting their input on their departments probably back in October, just a minute, yes, about October. So it's been, we've worked on this internally for quite some time.
And between now and January 1, this will be.
Right.
Okay.
We will, if not very late, meet this evening, talk about the strategy for tomorrow and how, depending on what council we have and what we could do to move forward.
Very historically, since I'm new to the council, the last time that we had this type of shift, whether it be positive or negative, in FTE count was 2007, 2008? Or prior to that?
About that time. I would have to go back and look at it
No, not
actually,
necessarily.
but it's been several years. We have made minimal adjustments, 1, 2 here and there,
For based on
but
attrition
not
level.
a comprehensive look at the whole organization. I'll tell you, we have not done that since I've been here.
And that would be my, lead into my next question is, with an attrition rate of what, 68% of 101 FTEs, full-time employees, with your recommendation here, are we kind of aligning with that in mind and trying to drive that attrition rate down? Because that really, bolsters, less out-of-pocket expense for training and so forth, tenure, et cetera.
I'm sorry, Cheryl, did you?
No.
No, because we're also looking at building an organization that's sustainable,
Mhm.
but also some succession planning so that we have people who are learning and training and ready to step into next level jobs, and this will really give us a good foundation to continue to grow on.
Great.
Do we have any idea of what the FTE count is per department compared to previous? Sorry, I wish we would have thought of that sooner.
And also, when we tell you numbers, some of the reorganization is moving people from one department to another. So it may not be total
It may
adds
not,
to
right.
departments, but it's people also being reassigned into a department. Okay?
Are there movements from utility to general fund? I think, from the general fund perspective, where they fit, how they're paid for, tax versus fees. Are we reducing utility and increasing general fund, or is it the other way? Or increasing utility and decreasing general fund? That's the, everybody gets, the citizens are paying
Yeah.
for this level of service, but it's how that's happening, I think, makes a difference. And then from a departmental perspective, today, we may have a position allocated to admin, but we're going to shift it to parks if the need arises, or we may have it allocated to public works, but we're going to shift it to community development if the need arises. So I think that flexibility will still remain in this model, should that occur. Because we move, admin to customer service if necessary.
With this lean model, we better have that flexibility.
Absolutely.
Well, this would be ordinance number
2417.
417. Other questions for Mary or Cheryl?
I have a comment. I think the direction is correct, but I find it hard to digest all this information without any justification as to why, some departments are shrinking or people are moving to different places. Some of these, if this were a spreadsheet, it'd be all over the place. Some of the columns don't even line up. You got utilities. I'm having to go through each one and say, why is this guy in this list and why is the name changed on this list? So I don't feel comfortable, really voting on this until we get some justification as to what's being done. Because quite frankly, I can't tell what's missing and what's changed. These should be in side-by-side comparisons on a spreadsheet that show, at the very least, the columns and the rows all line up, so that we know that this department's losing one and this job is a new creation. I just don't think it's very digestible information. Anybody else? This is the first time everybody's seeing this, right?
Well, it's the first time that I've seen it, but I've heard the justification for the changes. But so me personally, I think we asked Cheryl and we gave her time to go back and assess the organization. I trust that she made that decision.
Well, I think that's an important point, and I thought the same thing when I looked at it today too, Larry, and then I realized that at some
You
point,
mean now?
well, understanding that we have these new pieces here, that there's going to be things, and there are going to be these sort of questions. But as we looked at it, I mean, that's exactly, just like you said, when we went through the process to bring in city, that they'd be tasked with taking on these title roles, and it's time for us to put the trust that the organization's in that way, because through the talks with the department heads and other things, I think they're going to be the ones that are, you know, most sensitive to the changes, and they're going to be the one to give the greatest impact, and that information's already been collected and brought back to us. So I guess that's how I thought about it after the fact.
I have great confidence in the exercise that Cheryl went through with her staff to be able to, you know, be a good steward of the dollars, be a good steward to our community and the services they're providing, and quite frankly, just be successful in an above average way. I mean, they're not asking for 204 people, they're asking for, you know, 3 people. And I think that, you know, confidence for me and kind of what I heard Christie say is I have all the confidence that these 3 people are what we need at this point in time, and we as a council need to take a look at, you know, through the visioning process, where we want to be in 2020 when our, you know, when our population is going to be at 40,000 people. You know, that's kind of where we need to be looking, not at 3 people. So I have great confidence that these numbers are correct, and I have been able to put them up in a side-by-side comparison. It's fairly simple exercise.
There are a lot of differences there. I won't discount that side of it. I guess my confidence comes from the fact that they came back with a comprehensive review. I mean, it's obvious that everything's been turned over and looked at. They've added 3 positions, but they came to the table saying this is going to make us more efficient and not cost us more money. And if we can't find confidence in that and trust that they've done the job that we've asked them to do there, then I think we're just questioning at a level that we're working against ourselves. So that's why I come back to it and say they've done exactly what we would have asked them to do, and they've done it in the most time-efficient manner possible. So pulling it back, I don't think is going to make the process any different on the backside, and we're going to trust them to do exactly what we've asked them to do and exactly what they've already planned to be able to do. So that part, not only do I think on, but that's the confidence I look for from this side of it, is this is what we have to ask them to do, and this is what they come back and done.
For $20,000 year-over-year savings at this point. That's
We staff
good
3 more
chunk of
positions, and are going to put our folks in better positions, it sounds like, to excel within our organization, which that's where that retention comes from. I think people in the past, if I speak out turn, let me know, they've hit what they would interpret to be a ceiling within the organization, so they've had to look elsewhere. Where now we've got different levels at different tiers, at higher tiers, so they can see that there actually is a growth pattern there that they can follow. I think that's only going to work in our favor as well.
Absolutely. That's part of our plan.
And I would agree.
Part of the plan.
Exactly, that we're, we stated a budget number, and this plan works within that to the point actually less than what was proposed, and was designed to be able to execute our services at maintain current levels or improve those levels of service. And I think that's really what it is we need to do. And then as we get into vision, we then start talking about it at a much higher level, where we want to go and what we want to do. We want to shift here, shift there, improve here, improve there, and set those targets. So very good. A lot of hard work, a lot of good work on the part of the directors in working as a team to make sure that we look at this at a high level rather than a silo, and that's tremendous. We're not viewing this as a silo. Thank you very much.
I would like to just speak briefly to what Larry was talking about earlier. And I want to, this looks like great work's been done. I've had conversations with Cheryl about this. I've got faith in the department directors, and thank you, Mary. But while I get this, And while, like Randy said, you can sit here and kind of go side by side and make a comparison. I think that next time, figure out a way to present it so that it would be easier to understand, and not just for council members and people on the governing body, but I know that there's citizens that request this kind of information on occasion, and I think it's important that we make it easy to understand, not just for those of us on the governing body, but for citizens that might be interested in the information as well.
How would council like to proceed with ordinance number 2417?
I move that we pass ordinance 2417, providing the range of salaries and compensation of various officers and employees for 2013.
Second.
Motion Gregorczyk, second Harrison, that we pass ordinance 2417. Gregorczyk?
Yes?
Harrison?
Yes.
Morrow?
Yes.
Bonovich?
No.
Freeman?
Yes.
2417 passes. Thank you all very much. New business item number 4 is executive session. I don't have a copy of the language for executive session. This is for the purpose of discussing real estate acquisition. Is that correct? Okay. So I would need a motion to enter into executive session at a specified time for the discussion pertaining to the acquisition of real property, specifically related to the Big Bull Creek Sewer Plant project and the Center of Main Street project, beginning at 7:30, returning to open session at
20 minutes.
20 minutes, 7:50. Is there such a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Motion Harrison, second Freeman, that we enter into executive session at 7:30 for the purposes of discussing the acquisition of real property, returning to open session at 7:50. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Or, excuse me, all opposed? Motion carries. Very good. Thank you. Excuse me.
No, thank you.
Are you serious?
When have you ever known me to be serious? No, thank you.
Probably at 9, to the left, right? No, 5 minutes to get there, 10 minutes.
Me and Louis be back there. Come on, Jack, you need one. I hate this. Huh? I don't know. Well, anyway, it's not like that. This is, yeah. Getting something on the road, then you get out and look.
Everything from what we do now,
See, with these.
things about relations,
And
everywhere.
So I think they do this first and then the rest is. So there's a lot of things I should. We have to have a slide chart.
I'll have a drawing tomorrow that has the street pushed. 25-foot easement, penalty easement. So we're starting our right of way at 35 foot west. Keeping the layout the same, except the church is now come back and trying to save driveways in the rear and a bunch of other stuff. So that change is going to happen tomorrow, but I'll have something to share with you probably on Wednesday of this week.
When you say make sure you're talking about concept drawing, or are you talking
Now,
about?
this will be a drawing that will be real hardline AutoCAD drawing.
Okay.
That would be a site plan, building, parking, driveway, collector road, detention basin, cul-de-sac. It's going to have all the questions answered.
Will you have, you're not changing the building designer with this one?
It's going to stay out here.
Okay, so all you need is just that site plan
It's
and
a
then
collector road that's
the,
everything.
right.
Somebody flies a jet out there.
And then
see that jet
the
coming in,
landscaping plan, will that get updated?
I don't know, but
I
sometimes
don't
pretty
think
big.
that's jet.
And not just little,
I know,
yeah.
but this is a smaller one.
You can hear it, obviously gonna be different, and they're based on different calculations.
Yeah.
You can hear it, yeah.
Private lake.
Corporate jets.
Maybe that's right, what it is.
Yeah, well,
It's pretty big.
normally everything
Well,
for
you
the
know,
next
Bush
meeting,
was
I would
president,
want
he
by
landed.
Yeah.
Wednesday.
I was over at Walmart.
We can
Quite impressive.
maybe
Some
do
people were
Thursday,
trapped,
but
like,
everyone
that was
love more. I don't know that we can go too
Yeah.
much past
And then
that.
when they came back, they couldn't come back in because of the block. He was getting ready, that's what.
See, you know, people don't understand.
No, it's just a break.
Accessibility, some people like Bush, some other people have.
I just don't know the
Accessibility.
all of
They
them.
do, I'm gonna cause a mess.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
And so,
I understand.
like,
I certainly have my wings
using
on
my
my
attorney
attorney.
around
I'm
New
not
Orleans.
sure.
Okay, well, here's, I guess, what I'm getting at is, planning commission can see it December 18th.
Right.
So whatever
They
is
can't
going
win,
to the planning
can't win
commission
for
on
this.
December 18th,
No.
I need to have in hand
Doesn't
by the
mean
end of
not
this
concerned,
week,
just
so
means
I can get staff reports done, you know, the next meeting after that, if it doesn't get approved, then it's.
I don't know if they were able to go around
Not
at some point to
until
get in somewhere else.
January
There were people that were late
so
doing
it's.
that because
It's
they were able to get out, but then when they came back, they'd already blocked
December
out
was
the
early
street.
and January was
They
late,
didn't want people to eat.
so
Yeah.
you're looking at,
I'm trying to
almost
find
5 to 7 weeks.
Couldn't get in.
See, that's what I'm worried
The
about.
process with the city has been so cumbersome that they
We've been
are
working with
losing
them
interest.
for probably at least a year and a half on it.
Oh, I
We've
know.
been through all these designs before
I know.
and met with them and.
I think we're going back to the design, and they don't realize it.
Mhm.
They're trying to save money with the collector, they're trying to get more flexibility with the land, they're trying to cut costs, save costs. I just,
Yeah.
I mean, it's like from the holiday, I just don't know what else really can be done to help them at this point. We've met with them so many times on so many different plans and tried to help expedite things to get things through, but if we don't have plans in hand, we can't write a steps around them, so.
they're saying that we have dropped the ball, they're saying that they get mixed.
I stood for about 20 minutes.
They're saying, well, the city says, I think you guys go back and shoulder back.
Yeah.
And I took a couple of
They're
so
very
I asked for, and I came back. Told my wife, once this
disappointed, I guess would be a word, I'm afraid. They're meeting Wednesday night
So
up
I
here in
debated on
church.
driving in.
They'll have the drawing tomorrow.
Dad, you better maybe take.
I think they'll probably
Anything,
change
you know,
the
I wasn't
Wednesday night.
I was
I think I can revise it
I
on
wasn't
Thursday.
So I went in
It will be in accordance with your.
You in the hospital?
2 days.
I think we did
Really?
in the hospital last mission.
Well, what
We did
is?
your
Well,
site plan checklist.
to be continued.
Our guys
The,
final
did I,
CDs, and they showed that.
from X-ray,
But you'll have adequate information.
not necessarily connected because of that.
We'll try it. If it gets in,
Maybe.
it's heard on the, that's great.
Next morning, I didn't even know I had.
The guys will probably found they're supposed to go with it, so.
Yeah, well, like I said, I mean, we're willing to work as much as we possibly can. I mean, we
Was that
got
your
some
back
reasons we can't
Well,
help.
they
but
couldn't tie the two together.
certainly we'll do everything we can to try to help make this.
So anyhow, I was in today and,
Well, the church people have met
it was,
with.
you know, sort of, I had just put me on an antibiotic for 7 days.
Yeah.
City manager, they've had a lot of new
I
guys.
sort of treated it
Yeah,
as,
'cause they met with the
then
city
after
council about a year ago.
Wasn't that long ago?
I think so. And then they just didn't.
Well, you don't look like you've been through all this, you look good.
Well,
And
I'm
then
tired.
at
Well,
least.
their memory is just crystal.
It's one of those things, you know, is, what do, you know,
There's been a lot of things that I've been a little surprised
Well, yeah.
about, you know, we tell them something at one
And it
meeting,
kinda
and
happened all
then next
sudden.
meeting, they have the opposite impression, and, no, we probably should be
But I
taking
got
that to city
stand-
meetings.
Well, let's get some
Plus, you know,
that you're the latest.
good
thing.
thing
We have it on
is
Friday.
this.
Bar,
Having
or somebody needs to
back pain
position, they'll leave as
and
quick as we
they
can.
discovered.
But I've got,
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I've got no confidence that Wednesday night,
They're,
there
looser,
will be a consensus.
more steady, more.
What they want to do,
And see
what
whether or not the
willing to do.
antibiotics have
Oh.
Would
worked.
it help them if they
So
understood
it's gonna be a
the
project.
ramifications of not coming to a consensus that
Might
night?
not be over
I
tomorrow.
mean, would it
Oh,
help you to send an
I'll
email
tell
or?
them, you're either gonna be heard.
Well, I'm
Great.
glad you're doing all right now, but that must have been kind of scary.
Now, why is there?
Well, it was,
People traveling or something?
Well, it's the fourth Tuesday of every month, but in
Walked out of the
December,
house
that's
and
Christmas Day, and so we moved
they
it
said, well, where's the
a
patient?
week early.
You wouldn't show
So
up
we
for
played
Claire?
cards on the way in. No,
Well, I mean, you could possibly both of them.
It was moved a week
But I didn't need
earlier.
any on.
The January moved
It wasn't anything that way.
this is a once in every 10 years type of thing.
Nothing like that, it was just.
The fourth Tuesday
Strange.
falls on the day
That's
after the third Monday, which
Okay,
is
that was
Martin
a fast
Luther King
trip.
Day, so the council
You
meeting
couldn't
was
have beaten it,
Tuesday,
I
and we got
beat it
kicked out of
quick.
the council chambers.
There you
So,
go, you did.
we now
You couldn't
video
drink that
these
fast.
different
You
locations.
could have
It'd
gone
be a
over to
headache
Blazer,
if
you
I
could
did
have gone
that.
over to Blazer Burger probably.
Where did you go? Down to
Well, we'll see what happens.
One down the street. I went up to Liberty. Liberty, where's that at?
He's running for.
Liberty, Missouri.
You can be a really good.
Spending money and making positions we need projects. And we have 6 weeks.
Well, where are we? Are we 1/10 done? Well, I think that after the session, there'll be a few of those that will knocked off. Three of them, whatever it is. I think
Well,
that'll be the first one, if it goes right, and then 1 or 2. Yeah.
That's what you
5 and 6.
Sure. Helps the budget.
Yeah, but maybe 5 and 6 and 7, and they got no crap, so we're in there.
I think so, if they get what they want in there. You know,
Well,
I
I
don't
will
know.
keep you in the loop.
Number 7, resolution establishing a policy for property tax abatements for new and existing businesses.
That's number 7, and it got dropped by some other.
Imagine
You know-
Larry will have anything to say on that, will he?
You know, but here,
I
I
believe
just
it is
don't
because
understand.
they wanted it to be with
It's getting everybody in trouble.
the benefit
And that is,
change.
you're talking.
What is that? Because we call,
When I
we call
grew up,
we call
I
it
was certified
positive.
deposit back, we saw it about businessmen came in.
Now, I responded to your email, did you
You
not get
provide
that?
sewer, if it was that, you know, whatever.
I had a
Mark
problem
finally said,
with,
Whatever,
back and
his
said,
cost,
you don't need
whatever.
to worry about it. Well, I
You had to provide that, but it
I'm
was.
not having a problem with
no,
my email
no
because I noticed
tax
that
abatements, there was no.
I sent something out and then I got their away message like 5 hours later.
Well, you know,
And I thought,
city
well,
wide over there, they're gonna give us
why don't you wait
6%
late
abatement.
after you respond?
And you guys,
Okay, that's
So
fine.
what are these,
It's just nutty the way it is.
Well, just because we have to change the boundaries of the benefit district due to the final plat change.
So-
And so,
Other than that,
already
Jack,
passed
what's on
their
your mind?
side,
Well, I was thinking
we
about
haven't
the
passed it on our
shooting
side,
on the
but
weekend.
because it's tied to
About
the
the what?
plat, I think they
Shooting.
just wanted those two
Shooting? What's
together on the agenda.
Achilles,
Yeah.
Achilles, live in and then
Well, the football
Achilles.
field.
Oh,
The outside boundary benefit district is changing with the approval of the plat, because creating those tracks, and conveying them to,
They haven't been conveyed yet.
right, so they're going to be,
Well,
and for
the
once
warden
they're
did in
state.
1890.
Yeah, that's right.
The intent of everyone, but they haven't had the item.
They will, because they don't want those property owners, yeah. And so they were gonna go ahead and take that.
So I don't know when.
Yeah.
You don't need to do any presentation, I stopped by.
So they said, I know, does it really come out that way?
I don't know.
I know that way. Maybe the story.
Well, it's just unusual that something or something.
They counted the wagons to try to keep you awake.
How would it?
So,
Don't have another coffee.
Anyhow, and then
I'm really
on top
sorry,
of
I'm
that,
here
I think
too, I
it
have to
was,
come back after my daughter's presentation at
They
school
said
tonight.
it was gonna be late, but it was 8
She
She did well.
She did.
Good, thank you. That's important, however.
Yeah. But yeah, I was racing back here, they just say that it's the end of everything, but we just have to do our part.
Good. That's always good.
Come back and now,
this,
But it's good when it's executive session, so we actually pump it up a little bit.
as long as they don't do it again later.
They might do another one.
They better not.
All right, well, there's something.
Okay.
Our good
So
shot.
to get some victory.
Something that has to happen, we're going to trans system or someone else.
paraphrasing Rossi's famous speech.
That may have to happen after it's turned into before we can plan.
Yeah, just keep the lines of communication open, so that I know, what the status is of everything, and like I said, anything we can do to help, let us know, because, we do want this to happen, so, just,
I think we need to.
this has been a tough one.
This is first time. Land acquisition, their mind, didn't impose.
I think that one has been for holding things up.
I think it has, because,
City, we can't.
well, it's funny, they have to receive the land.
I don't know.
We're
Yeah, it was, we had a. Oh, yeah, we had it November 27th.
Well, I mean, ultimately, it's gonna be their land. If they don't wanna own it, then you could talk to Justin, see who's interested in some property from Parkland, my guess is probably not. But you can always ask. You could talk to someone at the park, maybe start with Mark. Well, no, I'm talking about as far as, doesn't get dedicated as part of the right of way.
You can find a perpetual calendar where we should online.
That's like a utility or.
Here we go, they change 6 or 7 meetings as a holiday. We know what these holidays are, years and years.
We adopted next year's, December's is weird. Because.
Actually, might go to, I wish I hope everyone has one day, but I don't.
I'll let you know when I get it.
Street moves further west, or more ground east, that they don't have the 8 acres to build a church. So the property becomes not liable.
Oh.
All right.
I can call you, so like I said, I don't know which is which.
Jerry, I thought you were going to get smart. No, thanks.
You did have like a fucking ice cream and then you came back and didn't have any ice cream.
Yeah. He's got all his ready. He's a good guy.
Well, yeah.
A little bit of face time.
I can't, I couldn't if I can't. Because I just want to see the candy. Maybe I want to. Because I just like the bad candy. I wanted the good.
Well, I paid $8 for one bag of candy.
Yeah. I had 140 people come to my house. No.
Oh, you did? What was their box? I took it from that call.
Did you not get my message? I'll go back and look, because I remember your call, and I know I got back to you because I marked off that I did, but then I marked off that you had never gotten back to me. But I don't know, I can't remember if I left you a voicemail or if I emailed you. I think I emailed you. I'll go back and find it and forward it to you. Do you not do your email very often?
It would cover the whole area. It would have to take off. But it would take up.
Okay. But yeah, you were the one who said that, I could respond by email or by calling, I think, and so I did the email.
So that's
I would be curious. Permission here. City Council resumes open session. New business item number 5, consider authorizing staff to make offers and negotiate for purchase of easements for the Big Bull Creek wastewater treatment plant right-of-way. David.
Okay, as we discussed, this project falls under the Uniform Relocation Assistance and Real Property Acquisitions Act. Requires council approval prior to us making offers. The offers will be based following the Uniform Act based on fair market value determined by an appraiser. To proceed, the dollar figure given will give us latitude to negotiate for the 5 properties involved. If you have to answer the questions.
How would council like to proceed with new business item number 5?
I move that we authorize staff to make offers and negotiate for purchase of easements for the Big Bull Creek wastewater treatment plant right-of-way for a maximum total of $82,900 and permission to make payments upon that. Second.
Motion, Freeman, second, Morrow, that we authorize staff to make offers, negotiate for purchase, and make payment for the Big Bull Creek wastewater treatment plant right-of-way for a maximum total amount of $82,900. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. New business item number 6, consider authorizing the city's agent to proceed with easement and right-of-way acquisitions for the Center and Main intersection improvement project. David.
Basically, the same criteria involved in right-of-way acquisition, just requesting authorization to proceed with tendering offers, totaling $121,000 for the 11 properties involved.
How would council like to proceed with new business item number 6?
9 properties, excuse me.
I move we authorize the city's agent to make offers to 9 property owners for easement and right-of-way acquisitions along the Center and Main intersection improvement project for a maximum total amount of $121,000.
Second.
Motion Harrison, second Gorsick, that we authorize the city's agent to make offers for easement and right-of-way acquisition for the Center and Main intersection improvement project for a maximum total amount of $121,000. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, David. New business item number 7, consider adopting a resolution establishing a policy for property tax abatements for new and existing businesses. And this would be resolution
1883.
188. Laura.
Good evening. Your current abatement policy is sunsetting at the end of this month, and following staff's analysis and comparison of the abatement policies of the city's most direct competitors, which would be the city of Edgerton, Olathe, and New Century Air Center, and I also did analysis of Shawnee and Lenexa. I'm recommending 2 major changes. One, to reduce what was previously referred to as a normal abatement from 60% back down to 50%, and also several changes that are intended to target certain types of development and direct that development to targeted areas through the possible additional abatement incentive to drive those things to where the city would prefer to have them. So, if you wish, I can go through a summary of all of these changes, or if that's 2 pages worth, I can do this however you'd like. So what would you like to hear? That's the overview, is we're driving targeted industries to targeted areas, and also to say instead of we would normally abate 50%, I changed it to consider 50%. Many of the other areas is to give the governing body maximum flexibility for, this is your policy, it's your decision, it's a place that says you can deviate from this policy for extraordinary benefit, or other means as you see fit.
Which areas, other than Olathe and Edgerton, did you check?
New Century Air Center, and Lenexa, and Shawnee.
And what were, and then, were there any out there that didn't have any abatements?
Of any of the,
Of those, you know?
oh no, they all have abatements.
And so Lenexa and Shawnee had what level?
They're, almost everyone starts at 50%, Lenexa starts at 45. Lenexa and Shawnee are targeting a different type of industry. They're looking for bioscience, high-tech, regional headquarters, LEED certified. They're kind of a different market niche. And when you move down to Olathe, they're looking for both bioscience, not as much high-tech. They do a little bit of LEED, but they're also interested in the warehouses. And then because we're closer to the intermodal, we're more interested. I don't think you should pursue 3-story office buildings like Lenexa and Shawnee are, because they're looking for regional headquarters.
Well, I can't wait for that.
You can, but you can do whatever you'd like. This is your policy.
We won't be as attractive to those companies.
I was looking to compete with your direct competitors, which are nearest to the intermodal facility, because geographically, that's where we are.
Those people won't come in on trains, they'll come in on planes, so the intermodal doesn't do them any good.
The airport, the New Century, that come in and look at their,
Yeah.
look at their,
Flying into that.
their work and their operations. I mean,
So,
isn't that who we really ideally want is?
you know, I think in the case of a strategy and a vision, I agree that that's probably who we want. I think if we realistically look at where we are in the development process and compare us to those other cities like Olathe, for example, it was a long time before they were able to attract Garmin, a good example, into Olathe. Overland Park, for example, with respect to Sprint, corporate woods and so on, you have to go back years and to ever bring in. Lenexa, when it began, was looking at, they had UPS, it was warehousing. That's really, or JCPenney was where they got started. I think with respect to the law, now granted, we are, as a policy, assuming this is passed, making a statement that we would consider 50% up to 65%, but from a statutory standpoint, we could abate 100%, assuming that Time Warner Cable wanted to put their, their corporate office here in Gardner or similar, would do that. I think, the challenge we have is competing with, Overland Park. There's lots of folks that are willing to move from Kansas City to Overland Park in that area because of the infrastructure that's in place. I think, perhaps in 15, 20 years, we may be in a position that we would want to shift our abatement policy and say, we're not really interested in abating warehouses. We have those. We're interested in abating, other properties, which is what similar communities have done in Illinois, around the Joliet area.
But with your permission, I'll go a little deeper then, since you brought this up. Think about how Shawnee and Lenexa are closer to the bioscience triangle, research, whatever that's called over there, that certain area. So that makes sense over there. Also, this policy is written very broadly. This governing body by Kansas statute can can give an abatement from anything from 1% to 100%. And that's written so that you have the maximum flexibility. You may deviate from this policy at any time for Section 8. What this policy is, and also I mentioned in here spurring retail development and finishing the commercial areas that we already have, trying to target east side of Waverly and Midwest Commerce. Those were specifically named that an additional abatement may be considered. There was no certain percentage given there because that gives you maximum flexibility. I would also remind you that a policy is merely a publication of your guidelines for consistency and to give the development community a certain amount of comfort level, that if they go to the effort to come to the city and do what we say they need to do, whatever, that they will be reasonably expect that you would reasonably give what you said you would give in here. It is still, though, a policy. It is not an ordinance. And ultimately, statutes drive what you can do, and you can do anything you want, 1 to 100%, as long as it meets statute eligibility, et cetera, et cetera.
I know another piece of in my mind, I just read some industry literature that spoke to white collar office space. There's a little over 2 million square foot available just in Overland Park. So we're also competing against existing.
The Sprint campus is still largely on
Yeah, and some of the corporate woods, et cetera. The other thing is, kind of to Larry's point, if you look at Google with their Google Fiber in the KCK area, we could perhaps, out on 35 attract, a regional Google office space. I think you speak to it well in bullet number 3, additional 15%, but also to your point, we can go from 1 to 100% if it's, good for the community and has that ancillary growth opportunity. So I think we have the wherewithal to kind of play both ends of the fence, both blue collar work as well as, regional area office space.
Well, again, it was written very broadly for your maximum flexibility, and yet I did add in a few things about financial capacity study and some other things that we haven't had before. Thought it would be good to protect us a little more. You're under no obligation to pay for debt payments. You may not pay debt payments for IRB bonds that go poorly, but it's still not good to have a partially finished project. I've added in some other little things here.
Hey, Laura, this also addresses existing business who would want to increase capital investments. Is that limited to a single location? So I'll use Kramer as an example. If they were to come and say, we want to expand, but in their current location, that would require, maybe they're going to build another building. Is that still fall under the existing, or would that fall under a new?
Are you talking about whether it's an
Like
expansion or a
is
new
it,
facility?
right, is it, so could they come and say, we'd like to be considered for an abatement, we're going to expand our business operations in Gardner, but from a physical building perspective, we're not going to do it where we're located, we're going to move it to another place?
Probably going to be considered new, but I would
Okay.
double check with bond counsel. Before I embarked on anything, we would always consult Dobby,
Okay.
but I would guess that's new.
Okay, I was just wondering. I think we have one.
But there's lots of things, and I would make sure there's a spot in here where I specifically added in that you can issue industrial revenue bonds on a case-by-case basis, merely for a sales tax exemption, no abatement involved, because statutorily you cannot offer an abatement. So there may be, when I talked about targeting the 2 interchange locations, wasn't necessarily thinking warehouses there. I'm thinking about things, hotels or whatever, that might benefit from industrial revenue bonds merely for the sales tax exemption portion. And that's not for me to decide, that's for them to bring up, and they will have their business model and whatever, but that's why that's in there. So there's plenty of opportunities here, and then this is an abatement policy, not an economic development policy, because I don't even know if you could write one that could include everything you could do. But we're talking about abatement tonight.
The financial capacity portion that you added in. I'm glad to see it, but is this something that is there similar language in other people's
There is.
abatement policies?
There is.
Okay.
In some, not in all. There is no one-size-fits-all policy out there, but there are many similarities, and I have the opportunity to go through and cherry pick the parts I like out of everybody's.
On section 6, the application fee, is that indicative of
It is. It's
our
comparable.
competition?
It is.
And then keeping in mind the article that I think Chris and Cheryl shared with some of our other fair cities and their growth and kind of the speediness of Overland Park being slow, and who was the fastest one, Chris?
Parkville, maybe?
On the response speaker.
Yeah,
And about the,
development.
I don't remember.
So anyway,
It was Parkville.
is this indicative of their costs?
Those fees that you see there are pretty much, I think, all but one, and one of them might have been 1,500. They're pretty much across the board, everybody's doing the same thing. Edgerton is the outlier here, because their policy said, we'll do whatever we want to do, case by case. It really didn't say much of anything. The big difference between Edgerton's policy and ours is their origination fee that can be used only for economic development is 8%, and ours is 1%. But then they're offset, remember this is the old Gardner model, they're offsetting, they're getting a larger abatement to offset, and the reason why you do that is because they control how the origination fee money is used. And it can be used for economic development purposes that can be defined by a governing body. It doesn't have to be at that project. They probably are going to use it for that project. But our 1% origination fee, you could decide, gee, we want to improve Waverly Road, or no, we want to send it over here to 175th and I-35. So it doesn't have to be directed to any specific area.
I guess the point of my question is that the dollar amount is not going to be
The
a
2,000.
discourage, or, you know, it's just a good old flat fee. Okay.
Other questions? How would council like to proceed with resolution 1883?
I move we approve resolution 1883.
Second?
Motion Harrison, second Gregorsek, that we adopt, resolution 1883. Harrison,
Yes.
Gregorsek,
Yes?
Bodovich,
No.
Freeman,
Yes.
Morrow.
Yes.
1883 passes. Thank you, Laura. New business item number 8, consider accepting easements granted to the city of Gardner by William Gay, the Shalak Mitras Group, Jeff and Joy Jacobs, and the Reimer family for the White Drive Sanitary Sewer Project. My apologies if I mispronounced Shalak Mitras. David.
We have a drawing to pull up. Basically, this is a project we didn't have authorization to proceed with condemnation. Fortunately, we didn't have to execute that. We're able to negotiate settlements with all landowners. There are 4 landowners and 5 different tracts involved. We'll have a drawing coming up here shortly. Let's see. That's it. This one takes a little while to load. There it goes, loading faster than one of mine. Just a point of reference, the Gay tract is at the very north end of the project, right there. The Charlotte Mitras Group is the Taco Bell Kentucky Fried Chicken. The 2 tracts, basically between US 56 and Washington Street, are the Jacobs tracts, and then finally the Reimer's family tract is the south of the railroad tracks. Simplest first, Reimer family agreed to dedicate the permanent easement, which is shown in blue, and then the temporary easement, which is shown in green, which provides access for $1,000. The other end of the spectrum, Mr. Gay agreed to convey the easement that we need along his property for 1,075. Charlotte Metris was one we were having some issues. Originally, the easement was proposed to be a typical construction or easement and sanitary sewer easement, which would give us surface rights. The owner was saying, but if we do that, then we can't expand, you're depriving us of use. Since this project, we're boring from basically south of the tracks to north of US 56, it's going to be encased. We don't need surface rights. Basically, we're going to put a sewer line inside of a steel casing. It's virtually indestructible. So we revised it to be a subsurface easement. They accepted it for $4 a square foot versus 11 or 12 for surface roads. And then finally, the Jacobs property, quite a bit of the temporary easement that we need. We're settling for a total of $70,000 for very substantial easements over the entire property. Settlements were better than what we would have gotten in condemnation. It's a plus, so we were able to avoid both the discomfort and the timeline. We would recommend approval of these.
Questions? How would council like to proceed with new business item number 8?
Let's move that we accept the easements granted to the City of Gardner by William T. Gay, the Shellac Interest Group, Jeff and Joy Jacobs, and the Reimer family to the City of Gardner for the White Drive Sanitary Sewer Improvement Project, and to authorize payments and landowners for the easements.
Second.
Motion Freeman, second Morrow, that we accept the stated easements for the White Drive Sanitary Sewer Project and make payments as negotiated. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. New business item number 9, consider adopting resolution number 1884, establishing policies related to the sale of surplus real property by the City of Gardner. David.
The city does not have a formal policy for selling real estate other than what was adopted several years ago for Gardner Lake. Every now and then we do get requests from individuals wanting to buy a piece of city-owned property. One recent sale we had was the old City Hall building on South Elm Street several years ago. That was handled by a real estate agent. The policy that's included in the resolution is liberally borrowed from the current policy of the City of Olathe. It also mirrors what Johnson County has. The big difference between this policy is basically there's a recommendation from staff as to whether or not the property should be declared surplus. The Olathe version has a committee doing it. In this case, the city administrator is the person presenting the report. I'm sure she will delegate it to one of us to do for her, but so we have a de facto committee, but not a formal one in the policy. Basically, the surplus property, if there's someone has approached the city for the sale of a property, or we identify a piece of property as surplus, we'll prepare a report which just talks about its value, its use, and present it to you, at which time you all will declare a surplus. The other item is it will be sold for a reasonable return, is defined for the appraised value, unless some extenuating circumstances may exist. The property would be basically sold by one of 3 methods: sealed bid, an auction, or negotiated sale. If you go through the use of a negotiated sale, then the policy does not preclude the use of a licensed real estate agent to handle that transaction. The city administrator would be the contact person for any request to purchase property, which would initiate the review process. For the policy, the purchaser should We proceed with that, we pay closing costs and fees associated with the sale. One item we need to, if we don't have a current appraisal for the property, the city would get an appraisal done by a licensed appraiser, and the purchaser would be responsible for half of that cost. The policy does have an allowance for the sale of property if it's abutting another piece of property, if there's no other use, as long as the property will go into play and appraised value. And then the proceeds would be deposited in the general fund. There's some escapes should you run into property acquired through like federal funding or something, if there's any restrictions of law regarding the disposition of the property. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
That was the only question I had, David, was what would disallow us from selling? So just federal, is there any state issues there?
Sometimes if you buy property or it's given to you by the federal government, a good case in point would be like New Century Air Center, when they were getting rid of what used to be the runway protection zone. They had to go through a process and have it, I think it had to go by fair market value, but there may be some restrictions. Sometimes if you do have property, if you decide to change the usage, it reverts back to the grantor. But they're very rare cases.
Thank you.
Did we make those changes then, or? No?
I spoke with, the attorney about the review of the document, and we reviewed it in council, so if that's okay with you.
I still object to the term reasonable return, which connotes, in my opinion, that we purchased it and we have to have a profit on it, which may not be the case, especially in the last couple of years. And it should be, in my opinion, reasonable price or fair price. I mean, do you agree?
I agree.
That's kind of a nebulous term. And then also regarding the closing costs and everything, some of these, just by convention, the seller pays for it, some the buyer pays for it. And, for instance, on the appraisal, I mean, aren't most even commercial buyers they're going to pay for their own appraisal, right?
Right.
So I don't see a need to change, to pay half. I mean, I think the city, especially depending on the value of the property, is going to want to get an appraisal on its own. If it doesn't have a good idea what the property is worth from tax rolls or even from realtor estimates of value, but the buyer's going to pay. I mean, if there's a loan on the property, the buyer's lender's going to require an appraisal paid for by them. So some of this, I guess those closing cost sections, I think, are kind of not correct. What do you think?
If there's a normal, typically the seller pays for preparation of the deed and half the closing costs and title insurance commitment. If that were a normal case, and then the buyer pays for everything else. But anybody that's dealt with real estate knows it's just a matter of negotiation. In some cases, we have the seller paying more. In some cases, we have the buyer paying everything. It's just a negotiation point. But if you have it appraised to determine what you think it's worth to sell it, that's usually your expense. The buyer's appraisal to determine if he can get a loan is the buyer's expense. So it's, as long as there's flexibility there that we can negotiate, that in the city's best interest.
But I wonder if we ought to change that just so we don't give them, that we don't offer to pay something that normally they're going to have to pay for anyway for the appraisal purpose. Maybe we could just change it to closing costs to be paid by the buyer and seller per the contract.
That'd be.
Or that way we're not committed to anything. Plus, like the survey work, again, they're going to want to pay for it.
It goes both ways, but if we get the flexibility to determine, how it's agreed to in the contract, that's great.
So you think we ought to change that, or?
Terms on contract?
Yeah.
That would allow the greatest flexibility. I mean, I think for the city property, I think we want a survey because we want to know exactly what we have and we're conveying. And they'll probably end up accepting that, but they may need it for lending purposes, their own survey. We probably want to just have flexibility and say, for the contract. For the contract, closing for the contract.
So just to.
So, just for clarification,
Yeah.
if council is going to adopt this resolution, on the first page of the resolution under section 1, third line, we'll be reading, instead of reasonable return, we will be inserting fair price. On the next to the last page of the contract, under section E, closing costs, after, second line, after the word purchaser, we'll be saying purchaser or seller as determined by the contract.
Which is one other place we need to change to.
Closing costs,
Yeah, so.
Yep.
okay?
So basically,
Or
either
seller.
the purchaser or seller.
Or seller,
As
determined by the contract.
determined by contract. The contract, and then we go back to, page, let's see, it'll be the third page, paragraph above B. Interested party should be notified and advised, party is obligated to purchase subject parcel regardless of the method of sale, shall reimburse the city for 50% of the cost of appraisal and closing. So I guess we should probably
Delete that.
delete that sentence. Oh, let's see, actually delete the whole paragraph.
Yep, delete that. So that would be the recommendation for the board.
Good catch, Larry.
Okay.
It's kind of my line of work, so.
Yeah.
Phil, you go house.
Other questions? How would council like to proceed with resolution 1884?
I move we adopt resolution 1884, establishing policies relating to the sale of surplus rural property by the city of Gardner, Kansas, with the 3 changes outlined.
Second?
Motion Harrison, second Morrow, that we adopt resolution 1884 with noted amendments. Harrison?
Yes.
Morrow?
Yes.
Bodovich?
Yes.
Freeman?
Yes.
Gorsick?
Yes.
1884 passes. Very good, thank you. New business item number 10, consider a final plat for Gardner Edgerton Elementary and Middle School campus, second revision, that would be FP-12-05. Amy?
Right. The final plat is for the school district, of course. This does not affect their site plan or layout at all. This is simply a case of wanting to preserve the trees adjacent to the homeowner's lot at their request, and allowing them to actually own the property that contains those trees. So what seems like a very simple thing has become very complex, but they finally have the final plat here before you, which would create tracts with those trees, which would then be conveyed to the adjacent property owners, who would be required to sign a form to combine those into their lots, so that it would not be orphan parcels remaining. So that pretty much covers everything.
Did you want a vicinity map, or you want to go straight to the plat?
I was gonna pull that up just so you can see what I'm talking about. This does also require a change to the benefit district boundaries due to the fact that the property owners, the homeowners, would not be participating in the benefit district. So because it would become part of their lots, we do need to exclude that area, which will be the next item on the agenda. So you can see on the plat, the tracts B, C, D, and E are all, would all be combined with the adjacent lots to the west, and in the case of tract E to the south. So are there any questions?
Why did the school do this, you know, is there?
The homeowners have contacted the school district and requested that the trees be saved. I don't fully understand the extent of the issues, but I know that there was an issue with the location of the fence, with saving the trees, and then also the maintenance of the trees and that sort of thing. So as a result, the school district felt that it would be better for the homeowners to actually own those trees so that they could maintain those and include those as part of their lots.
But there's no difference in the taxes generated or paid by the school?
Correct. The excise tax actually, they had to pay excise tax on these tracts because it's being platted, but it's excluded from the exempted area, which it would have been part of had they not been doing this. So they actually paid more excise tax by doing this.
But they're not getting a refund for.
So this is what is causing us to pay more, and they've already paid it, so there won't be a refund.
Other questions for Amy? How would council like to proceed with new business item number 10?
I move we approve the final plat for Gardner Edgerton ESMS campus second revision and accept the associated easement and right-of-way subject to the conditions listed.
Second.
Motion Harrison, second Freeman, that we accept the final plat, FP-12-05. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Amy. New business item number 11, which is related, is consider adopting Resolution 1885, restating petition for the formation of a local district for street, water, and sewer infrastructure to serve the new school campus. And adopt that resolution determining the advisability of certain internal improvements in the city of Gardner, Kansas, authorizing such improvements in accordance with findings of the governing body at KSA 12-6801 and repealing resolution number 1865.
As Amy says, this all has to do with the saving the trees and conveying those parcels to the property owners once they are not, now that they're private property and have nothing to do with benefit district. The benefit district boundary is needed redrawn to leave those tree parcels out. And that's all this is. It is merely a housekeeping to actually repeal the benefit district and restate it with those new boundaries. Nothing else changes, not the funding agreement or anything else the city agreed to. It's only the boundaries. Nothing changes except the boundaries. And it just leaves out those little strips of the trees. And this, it was actually, it went hand in hand with Amy's original one in September, so when that one was tabled, this one was tabled as well.
Questions? How would council like to proceed with resolution 1885?
I move we adopt resolution number 1885, determining the advisability of certain internal improvements in the city of Gardner, Kansas, authorizing such improvements in accordance with findings of the governing body of KSA 12-6801 and repealing resolution number 1865.
Second?
Motion Morrow, second Gregorczyk, that we adopt resolution 1885. Morrow.
Yes.
Gregorczyk.
Yes.
Harrison.
Yes.
Freeman.
Yes.
Bodovich.
Yes.
1885 passes. Thank you, Laura. We are now into the consent agenda. Rather unusual, but not necessarily bad. Is there a council member who wishes to remove an item from the consent agenda? How would council like to proceed with the consent agenda?
I move we approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Motion Harrison, second Morrow, that we approve the consent agenda. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Staff, anything for council? Any updates?
That's nice.
Council, anything for for staff, I would start off by saying, good work. A lot has been accomplished in a very short period of time, and we're excited about moving forward. I know that we are summarizing the first set of meetings with local businesses this week, and then moving on to the next phase of engaging residents in that same process, and ultimately leading up to a visioning process for us to move forward with defining at least our concept for the next 5, 15, 20 years. So good work, lots of hard work, and looking forward to that summary.